Go to the Farm Bureau guest line right now and are joined by Taylor McHargue, college football analyst with CBS Sports and ESPN, and a guy who had the unfortunate pleasure of having to work with me most of last season. Taylor, what's up, buddy?
Oh, man, we made it, Richard. We got through the offseason. Finally, some real football to talk about.
We certainly have made it. Hey, by the way, this morning when I got up and grabbed my coffee and walked out on the front porch, 58 degrees in North Mississippi.
I'm in Austin, Texas, and the heat index is 107 today. So I do not share in the good weather. We're still waiting on a cold front over here.
Yeah, well, you can live vicariously. I'll just keep telling you about it. I'm not sure it's going to last long here, but hey, we'll stick with it. Let's jump in. We got a game. We've got a few games this weekend, but one in particular that has a lot of eyes on it. Dublin, Ireland, Florida State, and Georgia Tech, and it's interesting that the number on this game, the point spread on this game, has kind of ticked down over the last week or two.
Yeah, saw this just a week or so ago. It was up to, I believe, 13.5, close to a 2-touchdown edge for Florida State, and that's moved all the way down to right at 10.5. And look, Florida State is the more talented team. I don't think there's anybody that's really questioning that, but I do think it's interesting that odds makers have this potentially being a closer game. I know these games that they've played across the pond, and I'm thinking specifically about Navy and Notre Dame. Just as a fan, I think we're all hoping that this is competitive, but just curious to see the battle between these two quarterbacks specifically. I mean, Haynes King had some flashes last season for Georgia Tech. I think that's a team that trying to get back to a bowl again. And then for Florida State, the biggest thing is what are you getting out of DJ Uiagalelei? I think there's a lot that's been made, obviously, of his struggles at Clemson that led to him ultimately transferring. Oregon State, I thought he was stable is probably the best way to put it. That completion percentage, just under 60%. I think that's something that Noles fans are hoping to see improved. Just, again, to me, the biggest thing that I'm looking at is how do these quarterbacks, how do they both look? And I think, again, Florida State likely wins this game. But odds makers have this being, it looks like a little closer than we originally expected.
You went to Navy Notre Dame, which was a blowout. You went to the wrong one, though. You got to go back to 2022 for that instant classic that we got between Northwestern, who went winless on North American soil that season, but they got the one win over Nebraska 31-28. If we could get a repeat of that, that would be fantastic.
That game was fantastic, and I think that was Nebraska probably doomed their entire season in 2022. Yeah. But as probably of the Week 0 slate, it's far and away the most attractive game that's on the schedule. I think after that you start to see some of these point spreads. I think they're expecting these to be blowouts the rest of the day for the most part. But, yeah, it'll be great to have real football early in the day and kick things off in the ACC.
Let's stick with the quarterbacks in this game, though, just for a second. So DJ Uiagalelei, we saw him start out at Clemson, and it was after that initial splash in the game against Notre Dame, it just wasn't great. It was okay, but it wasn't great. And then he goes to Oregon State, and he's good, but he's not necessarily great. And now we find him in Tallahassee with so many talented pieces around him, but he's also missing some pieces from what they had that partly made them so good. Keon Coleman and others in that receiving core. What do you believe about DJ Uiagalelei going into this season?
Well, I think if you trust what Mike Norvell and his staff have said coming out of camp, they're excited about DJ U's how he's performed in camp, and not only as a player with his physical tools, but just as a leader as well. It's clearly a guy that's been around the block, and this being his third stop. I think if you're a Noles fan, the thing that you're looking for is accuracy on critical downs, because I think that's where, in the past, especially at Clemson and even at Oregon State, that completion percentage has dipped in the past, especially on third down during blitz pickup. And you go back, he's been a guy the last couple seasons. It's been that 3-to-1 touchdown-interception ratio and about 56% completion percentage. And that, to me, that screams that is an above-average quarterback, but that's not a great quarterback. And for Florida State fans and the goals that they have and aspirations they have of getting into the expanded 12-team playoff, making an ACC championship run. They need DJ Uiagalelei to play at a step above. He needs to clean up some of the turnover issues. And again, to me, it comes down to critical downs, being accurate on third downs and accurate under pressure.
And then on the other side, Haynes King. I thought last year was a good season for him, just shy of 2,800 yards. He goes for 26 touchdowns. He does throw 15 interceptions. Probably got to take care of that number. But I thought by far his best season as a college quarterback, you obviously being there in Austin, saw him in his time with Texas A&M before he made that transition to Georgia Tech. What is Haynes King?
Well, he's a guy, to me, that last year especially really blossomed. And you mentioned the turnovers, far more so than DJU. He's got to clean that up. But for Georgia Tech, I'm expecting them to come into this game with quite a bit of confidence. I think people forget Georgia Tech was tied for fourth last year in the ACC. They went 7-6 overall, 5-3 in conference play. This is not a team that is expecting, especially with your quarterback coming back. I know they lost a couple pieces, but it's not a team that's rolling in there where they're struggling with their identity. Who are they? They know exactly what they are. And going back to Haynes King, I think if he plays a clean brand of football, it would not surprise me at all if we look up in the fourth quarter and this is a tight game. For Florida State fans, nothing would frustrate them more than if this ends up being a close game, even in a victory. But for Georgia Tech, I do not think at all that they're going to blink or be afraid of Florida State, especially since they're not having to go to Florida State, this being a neutral site.
Yeah, and the other thing that we forget about Haynes King, this is a guy that runs the football. He had 737 yards rushing. I know that's a number that you can appreciate, and 10 rushing touchdowns. He is not a statue in the pocket. And so with that Florida State defensive line that's missing some of the pieces, maybe that's a wrinkle that Georgia Tech is able to roll out and try to exploit some things. Should be a fun matchup, though, in Ireland for Game 1. Georgia Tech and the Florida State Seminoles, who, of course, have perhaps a little bit of a burr in their saddle still from the way that last season ended. I'm curious, Taylor, because you now live in SEC country with Texas being there, but you're also in the heart of Big 12 country. And, close to Baylor, close to Texas Tech, relatively close. I know it's a long way to Lubbock. But those teams, I look at the Big 12 and think that it has a chance to be maybe the league that is the most fun, the wildest, that's got the most teams that could legitimately win the conference. What do you think about the Big 12?
Well, I think from an entertainment standpoint, it may be – and I'm not saying that it's the most talented by any means. I think it's clearly the SEC and then the Big Ten. But from a pure entertainment standpoint, I think it may be the Big 12 this year. When you think about the teams that they've added that West Coast slot now, having Colorado come back to the conference, Utah, Arizona State. You're going to get some late kickoffs. They're going to span from 11 in the morning to 11 at night. You're going to have good offensive football. It's not a conference that prides itself traditionally on a ton of great defense. But I do think it's a league that probably has the third best depth in terms of top down. I think it's ahead of the ACC if you, again, go top down in that league now. I think there are 4, maybe 5 teams that legitimately think going into this season that they have a chance at getting to the college football playoff. The thing that I'm concerned about if I'm a Big 12 fan is this a league that cannibalizes itself? Do you get to the end of the year and your Big 12 championship is 2 9-3 teams where there's only one team that gets into the expanded playoff, and that's your conference champion? Because if you have a 9-4 conference champion, or excuse me, conference, they lose in the conference championship, I don't think 9-4 out of this conference gets in. That would be my concern if I'm the Big 12, because there's a number of these teams. I really believe anybody in the top half of this league, any one of those teams can beat anybody else, just depending on the situation. But really entertaining play, and I really do think if you just listen to what some of these coaching staffs are saying going into this season, obviously Utah being a favorite, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. I've seen people mention Texas Tech with Baron Morton. If he's healthy, is that potentially a dark horse? Arizona. There's a number of teams that really feel like if they get a break here and there, they've got a chance to, not only potentially win this conference, But if you get to maybe it's 10-2 and lose the conference championship, that they've got a shot at getting one of those at-large bids.
You want to circle one game in the Big 12, maybe circle Saturday, September 21st. Utah at Oklahoma State. Boone Pickens Stadium will be rocking. Taylor